Today's program is brought to you by OTCStockShark.com. For the latest and greatest OTC and Pink Sheets information, sign up for your account at OTCStockShark.com. Thank you for tuning in to TBC Today. I'm Brandon Vincent.
And I'm Angelina Soriano. In U.S. news, President Barack Obama announced last Wednesday of plans for a broad expansion of offshore oil and gas drilling in an effort to win Republican support for new proposals to fight climate change. Obama, a Democrat, said his administration would consider new areas for drilling in the mid and South Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico, while studying and protecting sensitive areas in the Arctic. The president, who needs bipartisan support to pass a bill that would set limits on U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, cautioned that expanding drilling was not a catch-all answer to U.S. energy challenges. For more than 20 years, drilling was banned in most offshore areas of the United States outside the Gulf of Mexico because of concern that spills could harm the environment. The administration has been weighing the pros and cons of offshore drilling since it took office and put the brakes on a Bush-era proposal that called for drilling along the U.S. East Coast and off the coast of California. An Interior Department official said the department will conduct the first new offshore oil and gas sale in the Atlantic Ocean in more than 2 decades as part of a lease sale 50 miles off the coast of Virginia. Republicans criticized the plan, saying it keeps the biggest U.S. offshore energy resources from being developed. Now over to Brandon with international news.
Thanks again, Angie. In today's international news, Google Incorporated search sites in China abruptly stopped working last week, but the explanation for the outrage shifted as the day wore on. The internet giant first blamed itself, citing a technical change, but later reversed course and pointed out the heavy hand of China's Great Firewall. The evolving explanation whipsawed Google watchers and showed how fraught with confusion the relationship between China and Google remains. The episode risked escalating their battle a week after Google stopped censoring its search engine in China. Google struggled to discern the cause of its massive disruption, in which users in China received error messages for Google searches on the company's Hong Kong-based search site. And at least for many users on Google.com, Google began routing Chinese internet users to its Hong Kong site last week, as it said it would no longer comply with China's censoring policies and wouldn't run a censored Chinese search engine. Later in the day, Google reversed itself, saying it had made those changes a week earlier. So whatever happened to block Google.com.hk must have been as a result of a change in the Great Firewall. The company said separately. The Foreign Correspondents Club of China said last week that it had confirmed 8 cases in which journalists based in China and Taiwan had their email accounts hacked in recent weeks. Several of the accounts on Yahoo Incorporated were disabled March 25th as a result of the attacks. In one case, the club said a Beijing-based journalist account had been modified to forward all the journalist emails to an unknown recipient. Google said that its search traffic in China had returned to normal. The incident added to the sense of confusion over Google's relations with China. Google said its mobile services in China were being partially blocked, but it wasn't clear how extensive that blockage was, nor that the Chinese government was definitely behind that blockage. The disruption was broader, if not entirely complete. Users of the Hong Kong site in at least half a dozen Chinese cities said they could reach the search page, but that any term entered in the search window yielded a browser error message. Users in some cities also said they couldn't access Google.cn, which since last week has automatically sent users to the Hong Kong site. The disruption was similar to how analysts expected a crackdown by China's internet censors would look. It also shed light on the role of the censorship regime in the filtering results for China-based web users. Any permanent blockage of Google searches by China would deal a blow to Google's hopes of continuing to run part of its business there after dismantling its censored Chinese site. Google said last week it hoped to keep its music search and map services in China, along with sales and research and development operations. Beijing has expressed anger at Google publicly for flouting its censorship regime, and a decision to block access to Google entirely has always been considered possible. Many analysts have believed Beijing would stop short of that for fear of infuriating Google's tens of millions of regular Chinese users and foreign businesses that require access to information. Because Google censored censored its old Chinese site, Google.cn. In accordance with the government rules, that site wasn't filtered by the government's firewall. Its international sites, such as the Hong Kong one, have always been subject to filtering, meaning that Chinese users' searches of some sensitive terms, like those related to the 1989 crackdown on pro-democracy protest, the initials RFA for Radio Free Asia, or even the names of top leaders might trigger an error message from the browser instead of a results page. And now to Angie with today's health news.
Nothing is sexier than a strong, toned body. And nothing builds great bodies better than a genuine Bowflex home gym. Because only Bowflex home gyms have Power Rod technology, the secret to getting a strong, sculpted body fast.
I was absolutely seeing results almost immediately.
I love the results that I've seen.
It's probably the best home gym workout I've ever seen.
Call for a free DVD that shows how to get the results you want faster than you ever thought possible.
You can't diet your way to a body like this, but in just 20 minutes, 3 times a week, you can be a stronger, sexier you.
Have one delivered for $0 down and pay as little as $10 a month. Call now for a free DVD that shares the Power Rod secret of building a strong, fit body.
I think women with muscles are beautiful.
Those are Bowflex guns, that's right.
To get a Bowflex body, get a genuine Bowflex Power Rod home gym. Get started. Call now.
In health news, the National Center for Health Statistics this month published a new analysis of data on marriage and cohabitation that concentrated on relationships in the context of childbearing. Using a nationally representative sample limited to men and women 15 to 44, researchers gathered data on previous experience with marriage and cohabitation, the sequencing and stability of the relationships, and various characteristics of partners. Most people in the survey conducted in 2002 were single, 42% of men and 46% of women were married, and about 9% of both were living together unmarried. In a sexual relationship, there were variations sometimes quite large among racial and ethnic groups. 44% of Hispanics and 32% of non-Hispanic blacks. Among women, 51% of whites were married, compared with 45% of Hispanics and 26% of blacks. The higher the level of education, the more likely people were to wed, and the less likely they were to live together. More than 60% of people with a college degree or higher were married. Religion also played a role. Among white men, 55% of those who said religion was very important were married, compared with 35% of those for whom it was not important. Cohabitation usually resulted in marriage, and by the 5th year, 65% of people in their first cohabitation had married. About 2/3 of marriages lasted longer than 10 years, with differences by sex and race. Black women were less likely than white and Hispanic women to be married 10 or more years, but Hispanic men were more likely than non-Hispanic black or white men to have marriages that lasted that long. Thank you, Brandon. In entertainment news, Heidi Montag has altered her identity yet again after she and Spencer Pratt decided to give themselves true Native American names in an effort to be more spiritual. So goodbye, Heidi and Spencer. Hello, White Wolf and Running Bear, respectively. A rep for the couple tell us Spencer decided to give up his previous moniker, King Spencer, because it was too much of a burden to have to carry the weight of royalty. Instead, Running Bear claims he and Heidi are getting more in tune with their spirituality and will be known as the name and creator that was given to them, our true Native American names.
Thank you for tuning in to TBC Today. I'm Brandon Vincent.
And I'm Angelina Soriano.